Before you ask, no, this isn't a questionable stocking filler from Ann Summers, and no, I don't usually whip it out after dark. Well, except occasionally when I'm deer stalking, but you know, you got to keep things interesting. Meet the Butt Out 2 by Hunter Specialties, the oddly named, slightly embarrassing tool destined to eternally sink to the bottom of your kit bag and earn you a few raised eyebrows from your mates if you do happen to muster the courage to use it in good company. But are they too quick to judge? Could this quirky contraption actually have a purpose? Let's find out. So mustering the courage to use this in the field took some convincing, but for my esteemed audience I decided to get amongst it and shoulder the embarrassment. Taking this tool out of my kit bag was certainly the hardest part, but after the explanation and giggles that followed, I decided to crack on and see how it performed. To my amazement, it actually worked, causing the sceptical audience to quieten and start to doubt their very existence as deer stalkers. Until I tried it on the second animal. Insert, twist and pull. Sounds straightforward enough, right? Well, not to get too heavy on the euphemisms here, but if you don't insert it all the way to the base, end up overdoing the twisting, or yank it too hard, you'll be left with an anticlimactic mess. This is of course down to my over-enthusiastic excitement from the first one having worked. But there's obviously a right and wrong way of using this tool. Which got me thinking, if you have to spend time learning the technique for this tool that's sole purpose is to replace your knife, because for whatever reason you struggle with the knife technique, then surely spending that time practicing the technique with your knife would be time better spent and money, and arguably dignity, saved. Just a thought. Anyway, when used correctly, it performed well, particularly on fallow deer and I'd presume other larger game. However, try it on a roe or a muntjac and you're in for a frustrating experience. One clear advantage is its somewhat more hygienic approach compared to traditional methods. But seriously, if you just take the time to master the art of performing a sphincterectomy with a knife, gimmicky tools like this become unnecessary clutter in your kit. Yes, it works, but is it truly necessary? As a piece of kit, it's cheap and cheerful at £9.99, but the fact remains you simply don't need it to get the job done. This makes the purchase feel somewhat redundant. Sure, the Butt Out 2 might be a quirky addition to your belt kit, but honestly, you're better off saving that tenner and treating yourself to a couple of pints instead. You can thank me later. All things considered, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. For a tool you might only use sparingly, if ever for that matter, the Butt Out 2 is decently built. It's made of sturdy, moulded plastic, so it won't break on you mid-use, unless you're wildly over-enthusiastic with your twist and pull technique. Put it this way, it will last longer than your mate's jokes about you owning it will. Hopefully. 7 out of 10. Let's be honest, its only job is to remove the rear of a deer, and it can do that, but not without a certain amount of awkwardness, and possibly some trial and error. If you're working on larger deer like fallow, it's functional, but for smaller game like muntjac, forget it. It's also not something you'll proudly pull out in front of others unless you're aiming for a conversation starter. Practicality is going to get 6 out of 10. Saying this, if you do happen to leave this in your kit bag and you're in a lost deer scenario, this tool does make a fantastic field marker for referencing shot site or blood spots. So I'm going to give it 1 extra mark for good measure, 7 out of 10. When it works, it works. The Butt Out 2 does what it says on the tin, provided you use it correctly and on the right size game. However, it's not exactly faster or more efficient than a well-practiced knife technique. And let's face it, no one's going to call it a game changer. It's a relatively decent tool, but nothing extraordinary. 6 out of 10. It's bright orange, so you won't lose it, even if you're tempted to. Its shape is, well, practical for its intended purpose, but also rather sadomasochistic. It's unashamedly bizarre looking, which does earn it some points for being unintentionally amusing. The design has obviously been thought out, but ultimately, it just feels like it's trying to reinvent the wheel. 6 out of 10. The Bud Out 2 is one of those tools that seems clever at first glance, but turns out to be a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist. Yes, it occasionally gets the job done, but mastering the same technique with a knife will save you money, time, and a fair bit of stick from your mates. At £9.99, it's cheap and quirky, but hardly essential. Stick to the basics. And as I said before, spend that tenner on a couple of pints instead. With a final score of 32, this tool falls short for good reason. The purpose of testing gear is to see if it truly earns its place in your kit bag. I get it, when you're starting out, learning the sphincterectomy can be tricky. That's likely why the market for this tool exists. But if you take the time to practice with a knife, you'll soon wonder why it ever seemed difficult. In the long run, the skills you develop will serve you far better than depending on gimmicks like this. Thanks for watching Deer Gear. As ever, if you found this review helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated on all things deer related. And if you've got any questions or suggestions, just drop them in the comments below. See you out there.